Jesus often withdrew to pray. It says in Mark 6:46, and after he had taken leave of them, he went up to the mountain to pray. The following verses, taken from the Gospels, we see how it was the custom of our Lord Jesus to withdraw to a place of solitude, to be in the presence of his Father, and to pray. It is so vital that we see how important this was to Jesus, that he would prioritize this discipline of withdrawing, especially as ministry became more demanding or even threatening. Here we discover once again how much more we need to withdraw and to emulate his example. I'm going to read Luke 5:16 in 3 translations, and then I'm going to, if you will allow me for just a few seconds, to bring up the Greek. Bear with us, it's important today. It says in Luke 5:16 in the NIV, but Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. In the English Standard Version it says, but he would withdraw to desolate places and prayer. So how similar or dissimilar are they? Pretty similar. But Jesus often withdrew. But he would withdraw. And then the New American Standard says, but Jesus himself would slip away to the wilderness and pray. This isn't deep stuff. Yet there is something there that I think is vitally important for us to understand. The Greek construction indicates a continual practice and could also be translated was regularly withdrawing and praying. I taught Spanish for many years, and interestingly enough, I enjoyed the grammar part of it, especially after the 5 years of, actually 9 years of drilling it in my students. I think I became one of the better students of grammar in that setting. Well, in the Greek, this particular word is rendered in the imperfect tense. There are other past tenses. It's one of the 2 main past tenses. It speaks of continuity, something that was habitual, something that happened all the time in the past. That's why they could say often or regularly, he would do this. And then you have 2 participles. They're gerund or gerunds in the progressive, present progressive, withdrawing, praying, so that it could be translated. He was regularly withdrawing and praying. This is important because it tells us that this was his routine. This was his habit. This was his practice. He did this often. It's important. Literally, it could be translated, was withdrawing to the deserts, plural. That means he had several hideaways and enjoyed several getaways, if you will. He was withdrawing to the deserts and praying. Matthew 14:23 says, after he had sent the crowds away, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. And when it was evening, he was there alone. I mean, it doesn't tell us when he went, how early in the day, or how late in the afternoon. But you get a sense that after spending some time there, it got dark and he just hung around there. I believe that's how much he wanted to be alone. I find that I am nearest to Christ when I am alone with him. And I believe that you can be near to Christ when you are alone with him. And I believe that it was true about him in relationship to his Father. That's where he drew his strength. That's where he got his bearings. That's where he was more focused. Now, I can't begin to imagine that Jesus was never fully focused all the time. I would rather say, as a good theologian would say, he was thoroughly focused all the time. But I think there's something precious about his going to his Father and there getting fully centered and hearing clearly and getting the strength and the readiness to go forth into his ministry. So, when evening came, he was there alone. But here again we see that Jesus went to great lengths to be in remote places of solitude for extended periods of time. His purpose was to be in his Father's presence and to pray. And then John 6:15 says, perceiving then that they were about to come and take him by force to make him king, Jesus withdrew again to the mountain by himself. Was this just a getaway, before they grab you? Yeah, that seems to suggest that. But I believe it was his habit, his routine to get away. So this was just another great opportunity to get away, to sneak away. But I believe to be really carried away with his Father. And Mark 1:35, which I almost missed. I said, there aren't too many verses to speak to this. There's just a few. But they're important. And I almost missed this one. In Mark 1:35, it says, very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went off to a solitary place where he prayed. Remember we were talking about evening came and he was there alone? That wasn't enough for him. There's also the other opportunity to get up super early while it's still dark and be with his Father. Do you get the sense that he couldn't stand not being with his Father? It's just, that was his best place, with his Father. No wonder he could say, I only do what I see my Father do. In Luke 9:28, we have an invitation, and invitations are wonderful, aren't they? About 8 days after Jesus said this, and I don't have any idea what he said. I didn't look at that whole 9 chapters leading up to that. About 8 days after Jesus said this, he went up on a mountain to pray. But this is beautiful. It says, he took Peter, John, and James with him. So, I guess this is one of those occasions where he didn't go by himself. But I think it's an invitation to us. In some of his retreats to the mountain, he invited his most intimate disciples to share in those retreats with him. I said earlier, I never feel more near to God than when I am alone with him. Could it be that he is calling you away to spend some time alone with him? I encourage you to go. And I pray that you would waste time with him. As one of our values, we say waste time with him. And it sounds so negative, but we mean just take all the time you want and don't worry about anything else. He seemed to do that quite often. We should as well. Bless him.